Entrepreneurialism can be a roller coaster ride. Friends and families are along for the ride because for entrepreneurs, there's no way off. Do you know the 5 stages of the entrepreneur's transition curve? Cameron Herold is the best-selling author of Vivid Vision, Double Double, and Meetings Suck. Cameron is known around the world as the CEO Whisperer. He's the mastermind behind hundreds of companies' exponential growth. His current clients include a Big 4 wireless carrier and a monarchy. Here's a glance at what you'll learn from Cameron. The 5 stages of the entrepreneur's transition curve, why Cameron collapsed on the floor shaking and crying on October 2000, the best thing you can do as an entrepreneur when you're stressed and facing a crisis, 4 steps you can take to effectively break through your biggest setbacks, and his title is Highs and Lows of CEOs.
I first gave this talk around 12 years ago at a program that was held at MIT from the Entrepreneurs Organization. And I did this talk because someone had read about it in my book, Double Double. They'd read it in the actual manuscript. It hadn't gone live. And after the talk, one of the CEOs walked up to me sobbing, big 6'4" guy running a successful business, and he was crying, and he gave me a big hug and he said, "Thank you for doing that talk. For the last number of years, I thought I was crazy. For the last 6 months, I've been suicidal, and now I realize I'm just an entrepreneur." I've been working with entrepreneurs all over the world for the last 30 years. By the time I was 28 years old, I'd coached 120 entrepreneurs. That was 25 years ago. I'd already coached 120 real businesses. All of them had at least 10 employees. So I've been coaching CEOs and entrepreneurs for 30 years now. Came across something called the transition curve, what I call the entrepreneurial roller coaster. We all go through this entrepreneurial roller coaster. I'm not sure if you're aware of it or not, but bipolar disorder has been nicknamed by the medical community as the CEO disease. Okay, if I read you the traits of bipolar disorder, and I have them on my phone, the 11 traits, most of you would say yes to at least 5. I would guarantee to say that probably 85 to 90% of you would say yes to 10 or 11 of the 11 traits, which means you'd be clinically diagnosed. 3% of the population is bipolar, 3% of the population are entrepreneurs. Steve Jobs was hypomanic and bipolar. 2 of the 3 founders of Netscape were bipolar. Henry Ford was bipolar. Richard Branson is on the spectrum. It goes on and on and on and on, the number of entrepreneurs that are on the spectrum for it. The difference is that we can't get off the roller coaster ride. And a lot of people will say, okay, my friend is bipolar and they're a teacher. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the entrepreneurial traits of bipolar disorder and how much that is magnified, the stress of that is magnified because of the pressure that we're under, where we can't tell the truth. We can't tell our friends and our family or our spouse that we're stressed. We can't tell our employees what we're really feeling. We can't tell our employee that we're trying to recruit from another company that we also think we're going bankrupt at the same time we're trying to get them to quit their job, right? So we have this crazy world that we live in. Who's been on a physical roller coaster at a theme park? Okay, so I want you to remember those physical points of the roller coaster, because this point when you're going up, I call uninformed optimism, right? On the roller coaster, this is excitement, it's enthusiasm, it's that energy, right? Remember that feeling? This is when you don't need coffee, you don't need energy drinks, everything is fun. You're going through a bunch of crazy, silly emotions, and you're so passionate about what you're doing. This is when we actually do all the really crazy stuff, and we don't even think it's crazy, everybody else does, right? We're so filled with that excitement and enthusiasm. Even if we see something around us that's dangerous, we don't see danger, we see an opportunity to sell tickets. Entrepreneurs, that's the roller coaster ride, but then something clicks, something changes when we're on that roller coaster, and we go across the top of the roller coaster and we hit informed pessimism. When you're on a physical roller coaster and you hit this stage, what are the words that you say to yourself? Those are the words. The oh moment, that is said all over the world. It's oh. That's when all of a sudden you realize it's a little tougher than you thought it was going to be. It's like that acquisition that you did, or that person you just hired, or the big ad spend that you just did, and you're like, oh, how are we going to make all this work? Right? And you go home and your spouse says, what's wrong? Yesterday you thought you were going to take over the world, and now you're worried, now you're scared. This is when you do need coffee. This is when you're feeling nervous about everything. This is when every time you look around, all you see is danger. You don't think you have enough time anymore. Why the is everybody so happy? When you're at uninformed optimism, happiness is a good thing. When you're in informed pessimism, it's like, why are you smiling? You start worrying. You might actually start to cry for no real reason. The feelings just well up inside you, and it's really hard to keep them in. And this is the times when you start worrying. You start thinking, maybe I've made a mistake. And you're going down that roller coaster ride until you get to this stage here, the crisis of meaning. This is at a point on the bottom of the roller coaster when you're not quite at the bottom, but you for sure know that your roller coaster is going to go straight through the bottom of the roller coaster, and you don't know if you're going to survive it. You're pulling your hair out. You're screaming at staff for no real reason. You actually notice yourself doing it and you can't even really stop it. You start playing the blame game. You start pointing fingers and blaming people. I sat with a restaurant owner years ago, 2009, had a great successful restaurant, 3 locations in Vancouver, and he's blaming the global financial crisis on his restaurants. I'm like, are you kidding? You have 3 restaurants. Get out of your office, stop reading the newspaper, and go tell people how great your food is. But he was so paralyzed with fear that he couldn't see anything or think anything, and he was for sure thinking that it could never get any worse than it was. And this can be the point in time where you start thinking of selling your business, even though that wasn't the goal, and you're selling out of fear. So July of 2000, I'm standing in an elevator. A company that we'd sold for $64 million was now worth $2 million. Our stock had gone from $23.48 down to about 12 cents. We'd lost to $62 million worth of valuation. We were sitting on the top floor of our building on the 4th floor, and one of my partners turned to me and he said, it's too bad we're only on the 4th floor. And I said, why? He said, we'll only break our legs. That afternoon, I was going down the elevator, and one of my VPs tapped me on the shoulder and he said, are you okay? And I turned to say yes, and I collapsed on the floor of the elevator in tears. I was shaking, I was sobbing. A week and a half later, I went to the doctor, and the doctor sat me down and he said, so what's going on? I'm like, not much. A little stressed. Got this metallic taste in the back of my neck. Anybody ever tasted that? Like you're chewing on tin foil? Put your hand up if you ever had that kind of weird metallic. Look around the room. Put your hand up high. Look around the room. It's actually a chemical secretion caused by stress. So I'm sitting there going, everything's actually pretty good. Now remember, I'd collapsed on the elevator floor 2 weeks before. Everything's going pretty well. He goes, well, tell me about this metallic taste. I'm like, I don't know, it's just this weird, it feels like I'm chewing on tinfoil. He goes, well, what's going on in your life? Well, I just got married, and my wife just told me that she's pregnant, and I've quit my job in Seattle, and I'm getting ready to move back to Vancouver, and we bought a house, so I got a mortgage. And my mom's got cancer. She's terminal. She'll die in about a year. And the company that we sold 8 months ago for $64 million, we got out for $2 million, so I lost everything. Other than that, everything's pretty good. How are you doing? He's like, no, back up. Like, I was clinically redlining, and I thought I was okay. I was clinically standing on the edge of a building in my mind, right, was how I was feeling, thinking that there was no way out of this. That's crisis of meaning. Now, at crisis of meaning, you can either go off the bottom of the roller coaster and crash and burn, or you can go through the other side of the roller coaster. When you're at that stage, you're either going to crash and burn or you get through that stage. You get through the crisis of meaning stage by getting some support, by having someone to listen, by getting some ideas from somewhere, by getting some coaching, by getting a kick in the by looking into the mirror and seeing what your contribution is. But if you don't get through the bottom, you crash and burn. If you do get through the bottom, you get around to this informed optimism stage. Did anybody here see the Joe Rogan interview with Elon Musk about 9 months ago? So Elon, I was a reference for Elon in January of 1995 for his very first round of funding for Zip2, when Elon and Kimball Musk had one employee. Kimball Musk worked for me, as did his cousin Peter Reeve, who built Solar City. I was a reference for their first round of funding. College Pros mentioned in his book. When the Joe Rogan interview went live, I sent Kimball Musk a note, a text message, and I said, you need to pull Elon off the grid. He's at crisis of meaning. He's not sleeping. He's been publicly saying he's not sleeping, and he sent out so many signals in that interview of how pained he was. You have to get help to get through that. You can't think your way through it. You can't work your way through it. I'm going to have Gina send you a chapter from Double Double that covers the transition curve, the roller coaster, the highs and lows of CEOs. Tim Ferriss covered it on his blog. I want you to share this with your spouse, with your employees, with your teammates, with your kids, so people understand you're not crazy and you're an entrepreneur, but we have to talk about the stages we're at. Thank you.